This video is brought to you by War Thunder. An Air India Boeing 787 lines up on the runway at Ahmedabad, 9 hours to London ahead. Air India 171, cleared for takeoff. The Dreamliner is cleared and begins accelerating down runway 23. But seconds after liftoff, something in the cockpit goes horribly wrong. Why did you turn it off? I didn't do it. Those are the final known words exchanged inside the cockpit of Flight 171, seconds before the aircraft is doomed, long before it can climb out of sight. To understand what truly happened, we built a full 3D reconstruction of the flight's last moments. We recreated the city, the airport, the crash site, and the aircraft's exact trajectory, stabilizing and matching every frame of available footage. And in the process, we discovered something the preliminary report doesn't explain, something that changes how the timeline of this accident may have unfolded. This is the reconstruction of Air India Flight 171. It is 12:30 p.m. on June 12, 2025, in Ahmedabad. Boarding begins for the flight to London Gatwick, one of just 5 weekly connections linking Gujarat to the UK massive Indian diaspora. On board today are 230 passengers and 12 crew business travelers, families returning home, students heading back to university. But this aircraft will never make it to London, because by 1:00 p.m. the cabin doors will close. And by 1:40 p.m., Flight 171 will be gone. The crew signs in at 11:55 a.m. for mandatory breath tests. Both pilots pass without issue. In command is Captain Sumit Sabharwal, 56 years old, with more than 15,600 flight hours, over half of them on the Boeing 787. Beside him sits First Officer Clive Kunda, just 32 years old, with 3,400 total hours and 100 on the Dreamliner. His mother flew for Air India for 3 decades. Aviation is in his blood. It is an experienced crew flying a familiar route. But within 15 minutes, a small action between their seats will decide the fate of this flight. By 1:10 p.m. refueling is complete, the bags are loaded, boarding is closed, the crew has taken on 54 tons of fuel for the 9-hour flight. The aircraft weighs just over 200 tons, heavy but still within limits, and it is a hot day. 36 degrees Celsius, hot air is thin, which means the engines breathe less efficiently and the wings produce less lift. That requires more runway. Air India 171 will need the full 3,500-meter length of runway 23, still well within the Dreamliner's capability. At 1:18 p.m., the aircraft pushes back. On the apron, the captain moves both engine switches to RUN. The 2 massive GEnx engines spool up with their unmistakable whine. Air India 171, taxi via Papa Romeo 4, line up and wait runway 23. During taxi, the crew completes the before takeoff checklist. Takeoff speeds are V1 153 knots, VR 155, V2 162. They backtrack the runway and First Officer Kunda performs a smooth 180-degree turn, positioning the Dreamliner for departure. Beyond the far end of the runway is the airport perimeter wall, and just beyond that lies the dense neighborhood of Megani Nagar. Visibility is 6 km, light winds 240 degrees at 6 knots, nearly perfect flying conditions. Air India 171, winds 240 at 6, runway 23 cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 23, Air India 171. The takeoff clearance is issued at 13:37:33. 4 seconds later, Kunda advances the thrust levers. Both engines spool smoothly to takeoff power. The Dreamliner begins rolling, and the countdown to disaster begins. What you are about to see is a detailed 3D reconstruction of Flight 171's final moment, recreated second by second, frame by frame. This is SARDAR VALLABHBHAI PATEL International Airport, modeled at 1:1 scale. This is runway 23, and this is the crash site 7 km beyond the runway end. These structures, buildings A and B, are student canteens. Behind them are dorm buildings C through F. The tall chimney is the Army Medical Corps incinerator. And this small patch of trees near the chimney is where the first impact occurs. It is 1:38 p.m. The BJ Medical College canteen is packed with students having lunch. Nearby, Air India 171 has just lifted off and is reaching its peak altitude, barely above the airport perimeter wall. As it crosses the wall, the aircraft begins losing altitude, and it starts drifting left of the runway centerline. We'll return to why later, but the deviation is clearly visible from a camera placed precisely on the extended centerline. At 13:39:09, the aircraft descends dangerously low. It clips the treetops inside the Army compound. A fraction of a second later, the nose gear slams into the incinerator chimney, tearing completely off. The fuselage, still intact, continues forward at nearly 150 knots. The simulation shows the aircraft at roughly 8 degrees nose up, clear evidence that both pilots were pulling back, desperate to climb over the buildings ahead. But it is too late. At 13:39:10, the right side of the fuselage strikes Building A's northeast wall. The tail section and vertical stabilizer snap off instantly, flung more than 200 feet away. Debris scatters across the rooftops. Almost simultaneously, the right wing slices into Building B, ripping free from the fuselage. The right engine slams into a rooftop water tank and becomes lodged beneath it. The remaining structure lurches forward. The left wing and left landing gear impact Building C, shearing clean off. The left engine tears free and lands near Building D. The aircraft, heavy with fuel, explodes in a massive fireball, reducing a fully functional Dreamliner to pieces in just 2.5 seconds. But what actually happened during the takeoff roll to make this nightmare inevitable? To answer that, we had to simulate the takeoff second by second. But first, you need to know how we built the simulation, and why we believe it is accurate. We modeled the airport, terrain, and aircraft in 3D. Then we stabilized the only available CCTV footage, frame by frame. But to match our 3D camera to the real camera, we needed 3 things: the exact location of the CCTV camera, the type of camera and its sensor size, and the focal length used. We found the camera by triangulating landmarks visible in the footage: the tower, road markings, the security gate, and the height of a nearby pole-mounted camera. Using Google Maps and reference photos from other aviation videos, we identified the exact position. The camera type was identified as a PTZ camera, likely using a 1/2-inch sensor. The focal length took the most time. We manually adjusted it in our virtual camera until the 3D geometry perfectly matched the real footage. Once the camera was locked, we matched the aircraft's position frame by frame. Then we validated the simulation with a second image, the RAT photograph from the preliminary report. Again, the match in scale and angle was nearly perfect. This gave us the reconstructed flight path, every point, every second, every change in altitude and speed. The takeoff roll begins at 13:37:37. The Dreamliner accelerates. Flaps are set to 5 degrees, confirmed from the wreckage. Using the reconstructed path, we calculated ground speed, altitude, and corrected for wind to obtain indicated airspeed. The aircraft reaches V1-153 knots at frame 539. 2 seconds later, at frame 599, VR is reached and the nose lifts. The speeds match the preliminary report. 4 seconds after rotation, around frame 668, the main gear lifts off. The airplane transitions from ground mode to air mode. For 3 seconds it climbs normally. At 13:38:42, the aircraft reaches a speed of 180 knots. Then, According to the preliminary report, something unthinkable happens. Both fuel cutoff switches are moved to the OFF position. 5 seconds later, the ram air turbine deploys, supplying emergency hydraulics. Somewhere in this window, one pilot says, "Why did you turn it off?" And the other replies, "I didn't do it." But here's where something doesn't add up. The preliminary report claims the aircraft hit maximum speed 180 knots before the engines were cut off. But our simulation, based entirely on the reconstructed flight path, shows the aircraft continuing to accelerate for another 5 seconds, reaching 196 knots. This should not be possible. When fuel is cut off to a jet engine, thrust collapses almost instantly. The remaining pressure bleeds out in less than a second. There is no way residual thrust could continue accelerating a 200-ton aircraft for 5 full seconds. This discrepancy is exactly why we rebuilt this entire simulation, to test whether the preliminary report's timeline made sense. And this part does not. Why would the plane keep accelerating after the alleged engine cutoff? Why would the report list maximum speed before cutoff, not after? Is there an explanation? Maybe, but nothing straightforward. Which brings us to the fuel cutoff switches themselves. There are 4 main theories. The switches were intentionally moved to cutoff. They were accidentally moved. A software failure or safety feature moved them automatically. They were never moved, and something else caused the engines to fail. Let's examine them. Theory 4. The switches never moved. Impossible. The cutoff switches have a direct mechanical data line, labeled RDCE, running straight to the flight data recorder. No software between them. Every second, the recorder samples the switch's physical position. If the recorder says the switches moved to CUTOFF, they physically moved. There is no false signal pathway. Theory 4 is eliminated. Theory 3, the 787's TCMA system, thrust control malfunction accommodation, triggered a cutoff automatically. The wiring says no. The cutoff switch has no circuit allowing software activation. The TCMA shuts down engines by closing a high-pressure fuel solenoid deep inside the engine, independent of cockpit switches, and once closed, it cannot be reopened by the pilots, but on Flight 171, both engines restarted later. That rules out TCMA. Theory 3 eliminated. Theory 2, accidental activation. The switches have 3 built-in protections. They are spring-loaded and must be pinched and lifted. They are surrounded by raised guards. They have mechanical stops at the base. Even if one switch were somehow accidentally bumped, unlikely, both switches being accidentally moved within 1 second is almost impossible. Theory 2, extremely unlikely. Which leaves Theory 1, manual activation. Some analysts claim it is impossible to move both switches within a second, but videos from cockpit demonstrations show that it is absolutely possible. We're not saying this is what happened, only that this is the only theory without a technical contradiction. Now, why wasn't the landing gear retracted? For gear up, the pilot monitoring must verify a positive rate of climb, but the aircraft was only about 55 feet off the ground when the engines began spooling down. With altitude collapsing immediately after liftoff, there was never a moment where the pilots could confirm a positive climb, so the gear remained extended. Finally, the emergency locator transmitter, the ELT, didn't activate. The preliminary report mentions this in a single sentence. The ELT sits next to the rear flight recorder. The tail section took catastrophic impact forces and burned intensely. It's possible the ELT was destroyed before it could activate. But that raises questions. ELT and flight recorders are designed to survive high-speed, high-energy crashes. Yet in this relatively low-speed, low-altitude crash, one black box and the ELT were destroyed. Why? The final report must address this failure. This entire reconstruction is our best attempt to piece together what happened, given available footage and the preliminary report. It raises questions, particularly about the timing of the engine cutoff and the unexplained increase in airspeed afterward. Before we continue, a quick word from today's sponsor. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever built. Available free on PC, console, and mobile, it features over 2,500 aircraft, tanks, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, beautifully modeled down to individual components. X-ray mode lets you analyze how damage spreads through aircraft systems. You can choose arcade, realistic, or full simulator mode. And now it's on mobile with the same massive battles. No special hardware needed. Play War Thunder free using my link below. New players and returning players from over 6 months ago get a huge bonus pack, premium vehicles, silver lions, and 7 days of premium account time. Now, back to the story. The first step in the investigation was recovering the black boxes. The 787 carries 2 enhanced flight recorders, one in the nose, one in the tail. The tail recorder was destroyed beyond recovery. The front recorder survived, but its chassis was damaged. To extract the memory module, investigators needed a matching golden chassis. They didn't have one, nor the cables. They had to import both from the NTSB. India operates dozens of 787s. Air India alone has over 30. Yet the country's Accident Investigation Bureau did not have the equipment to download data from one of the most common aircraft types in the world. Make of that what you will. This brings us back to the mystery at the center of this accident. Why would both engines shut off seconds after takeoff? We cannot say for certain, not yet, but we can say what didn't happen. The engines did not flame out spontaneously. The TCMA did not trigger. No software malfunction tripped the cutoff switches. The switches physically moved, and whatever happened inside that cockpit happened fast. The aircraft reaches 230 feet. It begins descending. Pilots pull back, fighting for altitude. They can see the buildings. They have seconds. They know they will not clear the obstacles. The aircraft clips the trees, strikes the chimney, tears apart across the rooftops. A fully functional Dreamliner is gone in under 3 seconds. This reconstruction isn't the final answer, but it is a dated, driven attempt to understand what the preliminary report leaves unexplained. The final report will hopefully provide clarity, especially on the unexplained airspeed increase and the source of the cutoff inputs. Until then, we hope this reconstruction sheds new light on the final moments of Air India 171. This video was made possible by War Thunder. Download using the links below. New and returning players receive premium vehicles, silver lions, and 7 days of premium time. Everything you need to begin your journey.